All right, let's talk about polygroups. I think it's a good segue into polygroups here. So if I scroll down, you're going to see there's a masking and there's a polygroups area. So just really quickly, what I'm going to do is just add some more primitives here. I'm going to add, oops, let's hit M. I'm going to add some more cylinders here, and I'll put another one in here. And you know what? I'm going to put one in here, and then I'm going to hit W to get my transpose line. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to move it around. I'm going to tap that in, and I'm going to hold down Shift and just force that in there. And then I'm going to go back. I'm going to hit Q to go back into draw mode. I've got the insert multi-mesh primitive selected. I've got cylinder still selected. I'm going to put a cylinder right on the end here. And I'm going to control drag. Now I'm not going to control drag again. If I control drag again, it's going to Dynamesh add all these together. So with all these separate pieces here, and in fact, just to make it more obvious, I'm going to take this one. I'm going to, whoops. I'm going to hold down Control Shift to isolate this polygroup here, which is just the cylinder. Control Tap to mask it. Control Shift to bring everything back. Control Tap to invert that mask. Hit W to get my transpose line, or you can have the gizmo and just Alt Tap there to find that surface normal, and then hold down Shift or just pull to constrain it along there. And then hit Q to go back into draw mode, Control drag once to unmask. So I've got all these separate pieces, and these pieces are separate as well. And this is a completely different subtool. So if I go to my subtool menu, I've got hair, and I've got this piece here. Now, why these are special is anything that's not vert welded, and what that means is if I control drag, these things are now vert welded. This one isn't because it's not touching any vertices on the head, but these are now welded. Their verts are connected to each other. So if I go and do that, right now they're not. These are just meshes that are shoved down in that Dynamesh. So they're not connected. They're not, that's the best way to explain this through my words. It's kind of hard to do. As soon as I Dynamesh this and I hold down Shift to smooth, they smooth together, they're connected. If I hold down Shift to smooth here, you're going to see they kind of smooth separately. In fact, if I hold down Control Shift and tap this one, you're going to see I can still smooth this thing completely separately. If I hold down Control Shift and tap to bring everything back, you're going to see it's a completely separate mesh still, right? It hasn't been Dynameshed together. It hasn't been merged or welded together. Because of that, I can go down here to my polygroup menu and I can do auto groups. Now, if I auto groups, and it's going to say it's going to group by topology continuity. What that means is it's not vert welded. All of these pieces of topology, all these faces are contiguous. They're all welded to each other, but they're not welded to anything in here. Now, when I did auto groups, you're going to see we have symmetry across the x-axis, but these polygroups are different from these ones. So if I wanted them to match either side, we're going to have to go back up to Geometry, Modify Topology, and just do a quick mirror and weld across the x-axis. And again, we're sculpting across the x-axis, so this is the axis we want to be mirrored across. Of course, if you want to, you can click these little letters in here. We can do mirror across the x and z. Now remember, z is that blue forward line, so if we mirror across the z-axis, I'm going to turn off LSIM for this. It's going to take this world axis here and mirror it this way. So mirror and weld across the X and Z. Now this thing goes forward and backwards. If we do the same thing to the hair, just Alt tap it, mirror and weld across the X. You got to turn on Z. There you go. So now we got a front and a back head just using mirror and weld. I'm going to go ahead and turn Z off. Alt tab for both of these here. So we've talked about polygroups. We talked about mirror and weld. Now that was auto groups. And another thing you can do with auto groups is it works with visibility. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hold down Control Shift. I'm going to Control Shift tap this mesh here, Control Shift drag to invert that. And now if I Control Shift tap these ones, I can add that to the inverted selection. So now if I Control Shift drag, I only have the horns. So now what I can do is I can go up here to Split, Hidden, and now all the horns are in their own subtool. So I can Alt tap the head, the hair, and the horns. They're all in their own subtool. Nice and tidy. Now, if I go ahead and Dynamesh these horns together, so now these are all nice and welded together, but they're still separate. So if I go into solo mode here, you're going to see anything that is separate, but these are vert welded together. So if I go again into auto groups, they're all going to get their own polygroup, anything that's a contiguous mesh, and then I'm going to want to do a mirror and weld across the X to make them both the same across both sides. You can also do that with visibility, however. If I hold down Control Shift and I grab Select Lasso, and I grab, say, this piece here, and then Control Shift drag to invert that, and then I grab this piece here, but this time I'm going to hold down Alt, and then grab this piece here, and this time I'm going to hold down Alt again. Now if I do an auto groups, it's going to look at these contiguous meshes and go, okay, this mesh isn't touching that mesh, so you know what? they get their own polygroups. Now if I hold down Control Shift and bring everything back, those hidden meshes, if I invert that, these meshes are the same. In fact, if I do auto groups here, it's going to give them their own polygroup, or I can just do group visible, or I can hit Control W because nothing's masked and give them their own polygroups. So now all these polygroups are blue. I can hold down Control Shift, bring everything back, and now all the middle polygroups are blue. All the other ones are auto grouped, and of course I'm going to want to do mirror and weld geometry, mirror, modify topology, mirror and weld across the x-axis to make them the same on both sides. So you can use auto groups to your advantage, or group visible to your advantage, or group mask clear mask. So let's go ahead and go back to group mask clear mask real quick. And just like real quick right here, I'm going to hold down Control. I'm going to mask this area here and here and here, let's say, and I'm going to hit Control W, and that gave me a group, a polygroup here. And again, Control W is the shortcut for group mask clear mask. So just give me a polygroup where it was masked, and they're all the same polygroup. So I can hold down Control Shift and I can tap that polygroup. Now you're going to notice if I hold down Control Shift and just tap an edge, it's a feature. If I have select lasso and you accidentally tap an edge, it's going to select that entire edge ring. If you want to avoid that, hold down Control Shift, grab select rectangle, and now you can select. It doesn't have that feature, so it's a little bit more predictable. So Control Shift, select rectangle, make that selection. And again, if you want to, you can do auto groups, give these their own polygroups. Control Shift, do a quick mirror and weld, and now every single one of these things has their own polygroup individually. And just for practice, hold down Control Shift, tap that polygroup, Control Shift drag to invert that, Control Shift tap that polygroup, Control Shift tap that polygroup, oops, and then Control Shift drag, Control W, which is the shortcut for group mask clear mask, or you can just hit group visible, Control Shift to bring everything back, and now they're all one polygroup. Just polygroups are super, super powerful. It's like a selection set in Maya, but it's just visible and you can change them on the fly. It's a very, very powerful thing to get used to using. So again, group mask, clear mask, you can use visibility, Control W to make a polygroup, and you're definitely going to want to use all of that to your advantage.